Hello and welcome to Comfortable Lies. This is Harry Felger. Season 3, Episode 10, The Most Horrific Unknown War Crime. Now, normally I would have a disclaimer at the beginning of any episode of Comfortable Lies when it is very opinion charged, or if there's something in the actual episode that is non-proven or circumstantial evidence supports the idea. But this is not one of those. This is actually going to be very rich in factual history. There is no conjecture here. There is no leading to conclusion. This is just stating facts, and it is about the history of biological warfare used by humans against other humans. So where to begin? We're going to start with a brief history of biological warfare. In biblical times, pre-biblical times, antiquity as it were, there have been plenty of evidences of the use of biological warfare, whether it be sending sick refugees to your enemy's camps to infect them with disease, hurtling dead and rotting animals over the high city walls of Jericho. The idea of biological warfare is not new to humans, and it's not much further from the antiquity that we find more evidence of biological warfare. The Black Death, responsible for killing off a third of the world's population, was used extensively during the Middle Ages. The Mongol Empire, using the Tartar forces, it was speculated that the operation at the siege of Kaffa, which is now known as Feodosia, Crimea, may have been responsible for the advent of the Black Death in Europe. Granted, they didn't have the full understanding that we currently have of biological contaminants and disease, so they just thought it was the smell that was killing people. In reality, it was the bubonic plague. But this practice is common throughout the Middle Ages. The use of catapults, at the time modern military technology, to hurtle dead bodies, feces, fomites, which are contaminated inanimate objects such as clothing, blankets, what have you, was common. And even the use of animal poisons in weaponry was a common practice. So further solidifying that biological warfare is not something that just sprung up in the 20th century. The history of the human race is filled with horrible things that the human race has done to itself in the name of conquest. Now, continuing on to the colonial, post-colonial era of the world, we can't forget North America and the colonial forces' use of smallpox as a way to weaken and thin the Native American tribes that were inhabiting the land. The deliberate nature of the use of smallpox by the British Army was made quite clear that there was actually letters sent between military personnel on the British side stating that it would be best to inoculate the natives with smallpox. This is not something that is really up for debate anymore. It's the way it is. It's another horrible thing that humans have done to other humans in the name of conquest. There is one point of controversy when it comes to this, and that is the treatment of the Aborigine people of Australia. There is a claim that during the conquest of Australia by the British, that they employed smallpox. However, smallpox was rampant in the Indonesia area, just not necessarily in the Aboriginal area. And the possibility of the vector coming from other Indonesian islands is always, a possibility. So either is the possibility. There is no real definitive answer about Australia and the Aborigines. The Aborigines are steadfast on the claim that this was a European tactic, and there's a lot of potential behind that, but there's also potential behind it just being a naturally occurring plague that was carried over from Indonesia, since the Aborigines were trading with other Indonesian islands in the area. And we're going to come to the end of this particular episode with talking about World War One. The use of biological warfare in World War One took a slight turn. It was, instead of being used directly against humans, it was more of an anti-agriculture convention. There was no more flinging dead bodies with a catapult. Science has revealed that the real cause of death being microorganisms allowed the military to take advantage of these things. Most notably, we are talking about the use of anthrax, glanders, and fungal contaminants. These were used by both sides, so having any imagination that it was only the bad guys doing this is patently wrong. The United States, by the time they got involved in World War One, hadn't had a competent biological warfare program. They had started it shortly after. The main perpetrator that's noted, of course, is going to be Germany. The use of chemical warfare by both sides is very well noted. Mustard gas was not a German-only tactic, but Germany did have operatives throughout the world with small packets of anthrax, glanders, used to attack the livestock and crops that were destined to go to Allied forces, the anti-German forces during World War One. In general, the application of biological warfare was left to spycraft as we know it today. It was never weaponized in artillery or anything like that. That was an invention yet to come. The German Empire had special diplomatic pouches, couriers, and small teams of saboteurs, and they utilized anthrax and glanders in the Russian Duchy of Finland. This was before Finland was independent during World War One. They had also deployed operatives throughout Romania, the United States, and Argentina. The operatives in these then neutral countries, their goal was to disrupt the enemy supply lines, because the neutrality of these countries allowed them to trade with their enemies. And, well, if the livestock shows up sick or dead, if the grain shows up inedible, well, then that's supply line disruption. Classic subterfuge and sabotage maneuvers. One of our more notable cases in the United States was a German intelligence officer and U.S. citizen, Dr. Anton Casimir Dilliger. He had a secret lab in his sister's basement and produced glanders to infect livestock. The disease spread into Newport News, Norfolk, Baltimore, and New York City, and probably had gone as far out as St. Louis and Covington. This is considered an act of war, but was only revealed after World War One was over. In Argentina, same situation. German agents were employing glanders in the port of Buenos Aires to infect livestock that was headed towards England, France, what have you. They also infected wheat with destructive fungi to cut their wheat production so that they couldn't trade it. But Germany was also victim to these attacks. French saboteurs in Switzerland infected German horses, horses destined for Germany, with glanders, with the bacteria that causes glanders specifically. At the end of World War I in 1925, the Geneva Protocol prohibited the use of chemical and biological weapons, but failed to really address the development, experimentation, production, storage, transfer of these same weapons. This, combined with advances in science, made what happened in World War II even more horrific than what was going on in World War I. Medical technologies lacking in World War I made the biological and chemical warfare much more severe for the time, but the medical technology in reference to contagion made what happened in World War II even more tragic. So I'm going to cut this here because the actual most horrific unknown war crime requires a lot of time to talk about, and that is going to be in the next episode of Comfortable Lies. Thank you for joining me. This has been Harry Felker, and stay safe out there.